So my name is Denise Miller, and it's almost a coincidence. I've started a bit late. I'm working at home and I have a child, so it really follows on nicely from the previous presentation that I will have to nip off soon after I finish the presentation, unfortunately. So I hope that's okay. All right, so as you can see, my presentation is about Black British female managers, and my paper is called The Silent Catastrophe. I'm just going to close my video because I will otherwise nip off. So hopefully you can still hear me. All right, first of all, I'd like to say thank you very much for inviting me to present today. I will be presenting the findings from a research study that is very close to my heart. And the purpose of the study was to explore the experiences of Black British female managers who were employed by children and young people's services. So I will start how I plan to finish, with the words of two participants. Deflated, depleted, downtrodden. To have come this far, and at my age, and all that I have done, I didn't do it 100%. I gave 200%. And someone else who did half of that can be above me. Yeah, disillusioned. So there were lots and lots of barriers, so much so that in the end I left. I stepped down after 36 years of teaching. The pressure became too much. Now in 2018, the former First Lady, Michelle Obama, said, "Our stories as Black people, as Black women, have power. We don't often get to see ourselves. We don't hear ourselves because we don't control the narrative. How rare is it that a Black woman, a modern day woman, gets the opportunity to tell her story?" I agree. I do believe our stories have power, and the study I'm going to present to you today was born of this premise. First, a few cold, hard facts. Did you know that 1 in 8 Black and minority ethnic women are in insecure jobs? Did you know that 3 out of 5 Black and minority ethnic women in self-employment are low paid compared to 2 out of 5 white men? Did you know that 1 in 8 Black and minority ethnic women are underemployed compared to 1 in 13 white men? Did you know that 45% of Black and minority ethnic women say that they have been singled out for harder or unpopular tasks at work compared to their white counterparts? Did you know that nearly 1/3 of Black and minority ethnic women report being unfairly passed over or denied promotion at work? And this figure is nearly doubled for Black, minority and ethnic disabled women. Did you know that 34% of Black, minority and ethnic women have experienced racist jokes and so-called banter at work? And they have experienced 30% more verbal abuse than their white counterparts. Similarly, Black, minority and ethnic women entering the labour market are often forced to take jobs well below their qualification level. And furthermore, occupational differences appear across all levels of seniority, with the labour market being the starkest and the highest places where underrepresentation occurs. These experiences of discrimination and unfair treatment in the workplace can have profound impacts on Black women's mental health and well-being. For instance, Black, Asian, and minority ethnic women are slightly more worried about being in debt as a result of COVID-19. Of those who are now working from home, a high proportion of Black, Asian, and minority ethnic women say that they're working harder than they did before the pandemic compared to white women. And unsurprisingly, given these facts, life satisfaction and happiness were the lowest for Black, Asian, and minority ethnic women. In short, the impact of discrimination and disadvantage can cost Black, Asian, and minority ethnic women and their children their lives. Did you know that Black women are 4 times more likely to die in childbirth? You might ask, why Black British? Now, the Windrush era refers to a period after the war where many Caribbean immigrants, known as the Windrush generation, arrived in the UK. And these people, who included my parents and grandparents, they faced significant racial discrimination and prejudice during their migration and subsequent settlement. Researching the experiences of Black British female managers who grew up in this era provides valuable insights into the historical factors that have shaped their experiences of racism and gender discrimination. Specifically, understanding the intersectional experiences of Black women in managerial positions allows for a more comprehensive analysis of the barriers they faced and the strategies they employed to overcome them. In so doing, the research findings can hopefully inform the development of policies and initiatives aimed at promoting diversity, equity, equality, and inclusion in the workplace. By researching racism, Black British female managers who grew up in the Windrush era, I aim to develop a better understanding of the historical, intersectional, and systemic factors that influence their experiences. And one of the research questions that guided my study is what I'm going to present to you today, is how do Black British women become and experience being managers in children and young people's services? For this study, I recruited 10 Black British female managers who worked for various sectors within children and young people's services. They worked in higher education, further education, primary and secondary schools, and they were also educational psychologists. They were aged between 40 and 60 plus years old. And so that meant that the women were likely to be retiring within the next 2 decades. This was a convenient sample from a network of colleagues. Basically, they consisted of 3 Black British female managers that I knew, and the samples snowballed from there. They all had at least 5 years managerial experience. And this means that they were responsible for an organization or a staff group. I conducted semi-structured interviews, and the transcripts were analyzed using Sharmez's constructivist grounded theory. Now, Sharmez talks about the reality being subjective. And she acknowledges that researchers' backgrounds will unavoidably, and I was reassured that's an acceptable part of the research process. Nevertheless, every effort was made to ensure that the findings represented the participants. The first, the participants' early and formative and their family. As noted by the women, their parents did not put a ceiling on their ambitions. Participants said, they didn't put that ceiling on us like we can do this, we can't do that. I always felt for all of us, they said, what do you want to do? And let's work out how you want to do it. Participants envisaged that a good education could provide themselves and their children with the opportunity to climb up the social mobility ladder. For this reason, the women continually were encouraged by their parents to work twice as hard. Participants said, you have to work twice as hard. Your education was very important, and don't be deceived when people want to let you do less than what you want to do. This is not to say that all of the women who participated in this study received the same parental advice and support. One participant said that her parents wanted her to leave school and enter the world of work as soon as possible. In this case, during her early childhood and formative years, her older sister served as a particularly influential, positive role model. Essentially, what this highlights is how the participants' family members, and particularly their mothers, taught them important lessons about determination, decision-making, and work ethics. The next theme reveals that Black British female managers' experiences at school were not so encouraging. The participants reported that unlike their families, often significant educational professionals had little positive influence over the development of their careers. In fact, for the most part, they were actively discouraged from perceiving the aspirational goals that their parents had envisioned for them. Participants said, I remember I said to the careers teacher, I wanted to be a professional, and she turned round to me and said, I know what's a good job for you, a sales assistant. In their early and formative years, the participants started to develop a sense of what it meant to be a Black woman in the UK. In addition to racist bullying from their young peers, the women recalled several events that left them in no doubt that being noticeably different to the dominant ethnic group was not necessarily a good thing. These memorable occasions raised the salience of their racial identity, sometimes for the very first time. It is striking, however, to hear how resilient the young Black British female managers were. Participants said, I had to be very, very strong within myself, and my parents had instilled those values within me. The next theme explores how they continued to experience discrimination, but this time in their workplaces. Many of the participants viewed organisational cultures as obstacles to their career progression. One of the most frequently reported problems faced by the women was their limited access to, or exclusion from, informal yet highly important social networks. Participants said, "Getting jobs is about who you know, and losing jobs is about, who's protected and those sorts of things. So it's looking at the structures and the systems." According to my participants, these cliquey networks serve to bring together a select group of people that invariably behave in institutionally racist ways. The women spoke about the existence of a powerful subculture within their workplaces, where white people assisted one another in acquiring jobs and promotion. Participants said, when it comes to having access to influence and power, that is still held in a small group. In other words, Black British female managers perceive that they have been excluded from informal networks, where had they been excluded, they might have been privy to important, life-changing information and opportunity. The women also described contemporary acts of racial discrimination as being much more subtle and harder to prove. They also felt that their performance was judged more harshly because of the colour of their skin, even when they were more highly qualified than their white counterparts. And so they worked 20 times harder. Notably, the participants' discourse consistently related to racial inequality and not discrimination based on gender. The women perceived that both white men and white women did not encounter the same problems that they did. Diane Abbott, the UK's first Black female Member of Parliament, coined the phrase the silent catastrophe to summarise the ways in which she perceived that schools in the UK were failing Black British children. Likewise, in this study, the term is used to summarise the ways in which participants were being failed by their respective places of work. The women's comments show that the combined effects of race and culture, and possibly gender, rendered the glass ceiling metaphor insufficient. The glass ceiling imagery signifies the inability of all women to rise above a certain level. However, the barriers that participants encountered in my study were much more significant. It seems that a concrete ceiling was encountered by the participants. The experience of racism caused some of the participants to lose self-confidence. They questioned their abilities and they questioned their capabilities. Indeed, research evidence suggests racial discrimination can cause victims to suffer clinical depression, anxiety disorders, post-traumatic stress disorders, and personality disorders. Without a doubt, in this study, the participants described their personal experiences and issues that caused them to reconsider whether they wish to pursue a career in child and youth services. As you can see from the quotes on the screen, There are many consequences for Black British female managers who worked for children and young people's services. The women in this study realized that their level of success was largely outside of their control. They were tired, deflated, depleted, downtrodden, disillusioned, and misunderstood. Indeed, some Black British female managers left their workplaces altogether, despite having worked much harder than their white counterparts and much harder than their parents had advised. I would like to leave you on an optimistic note. I pray that the challenges that I have outlined can be overcome through a commitment to dismantling stereotypes, prejudice, and racism, paving the way for future generations of Black British women and leaders. Large organizations will need to create a welcoming and inclusive environment that values diversity and actively promotes the representation and advancement of Black women in leadership positions. This includes addressing biases, providing equal opportunities, and ensuring a supportive workplace culture. The establishment of mentorship and sponsorship programs where aspiring leaders are paired with experienced mentors who can provide guidance, support, and networking opportunities might help. Sponsors can advocate for their mentees to help them navigate their career challenges and open doors to advancement. There needs to be targeted professional development programs and training initiatives that address the unique challenges faced by Black women in leadership positions. And of course, the visibility and representation of Black women leaders in children and young people's services needs to be promoted. It's important to celebrate our achievements, highlight contributions, and provide platforms for us to share our expertise and experiences. Alongside this, there is a need for regular audits of recruitment and promotion rounds, and this should be published. And the sticking points for Black, Asian, and minority ethnic staff needs to be examined, and something needs to be done about it. That is, leaders need to recognize and address systemic barriers that disproportionately affect Black women's progression and education in leadership. Organizations need to recognize and value our unique strengths. Engaging in open and empathetic conversations about race, actively listening to marginalized voices, and taking responsibility for personal biases and actions are essential steps in combating prejudice, discrimination, and racism. I believe today's gathering is an opportunity for us all to learn and grow and be inspired by different stories. Thank you for listening.